Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have back with us today David Rubin. He's the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, and he's also the president and the founder of Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, established to heal the trauma of terror victims, especially with children. And let me encourage you to support that. You can go to shilohisraelchildren.org, or you can communicate with him through davidrubinisrael.com, two websites there. If you want to get involved in that. Hi, David. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, good to be back with you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know where to start, but yesterday, Secretary of State John Kerry gave the most arrogant, condescending speech, I think, of the history of the Secretary of State in the United States against Israel. I just stunned by it. What's your take?
Well, what can I say? I mean, John Kerry, he looked like he was trying to sound like an authority on the Middle East, or sound like he knows what he's talking about. He actually came off to me sounding very confused and very self-righteous at the same time, which is an interesting kind of combination. Look, the guy doesn't have a clue. He doesn't know what's going on here. He certainly doesn't know what's happening in the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria, where I'm speaking to you from tonight, or this morning, I should say, for your purposes. Look, it's a big problem when you have a Secretary of State who's trying to create a legacy for himself, and the president who's trying to create a legacy for himself, and the legacy isn't a good one. The two of them are going to go down in history as being the most hostile president and Secretary of State, respectively, certainly since Jimmy Carter and probably a lot further back. So it's sad. It's sad. What can I say?
Yeah, it's very sad. All right, back to the UN Security Council resolution that where the United States abstained. That was the first indication. One of the questions that the media here can't answer, which is interesting because I think there's a spiritual application to it, and the reason they can't answer it, but is why did President Barack Obama order the ambassador of the UN to abstain from the vote? What's your take on that?
Well, look, Barack Obama, when he came into office with the goal to change America's relationship with the Islamic world. That was the most important thing to him. And this is the central crux of my book, The Islamic Tsunami, that so many people have read and understood from, that what we're talking about here is a fundamental religious clash of civilizations. And Barack Obama comes from the Islamic world.
Right.
Whatever his theological beliefs are, whatever his theological beliefs are today, he comes from the Islamic world. And it's a combination of that and the secular left, which is a very weird kind of combination. But that's what his views are. His views are not Judeo-Christian. That isn't what he comes from. Mm-hmm. And his goal was to change the relationship, to improve the relationship with the Islamic world. And in order to do that, you have to cozy up to terrorist organizations. You have to cozy up to brutal dictatorial regimes. You have to cozy up to those who are the enemies of Israel. And that is really the crux of the problem from the beginning of the Obama administration and all the way up to today. So why would he go forward today and do what he did in the UN? Because he's a lame duck president. He knows that he doesn't have to get elected again. And he knows that he's not beholden to Congress anymore. He doesn't have to cooperate with the few members of the Democratic Party that still support Israel. So he went forward and he did what he really believes in, which is to give Israel a zinger. And Kerry, of course, being, the how shall I say, the quintessential secular leftist just followed through on those beliefs, and the secular left ceased to be pro-Israel many, many years ago.
All right. This still has some residual impact across the world. I know that France is looking at putting together a peace conference, and a lot of those people that voted against Israel will show up there. I don't know whether or not Israel is going to attend that or not. Do you think that the relationship now with Israel and the UN is forever damaged? And it looks like in Congress, it was released this morning that members of Congress now are going to go after the UN, maybe pulling back support, maybe going as far as defunding it. And there's even a push in some areas to get the UN out of the U.S. and the U.S. out of the UN. What do you think the relationship will be in the future?
Well, I'm kind of amused by the question because whether the relationship between the UN and Israel is forever damaged now, the relationship with the UN and Israel has not been good since 1948.
Right.
Okay, 1948, for those of your viewers who don't know, was when the state of Israel was reestablished again as a sovereign nation. And that was 1948. The UN approved it. Since then, it's been all downhill. Yeah. As the Arab nations, all got their independence and their power, and the third world got its power, and they started to collude with the Islamic nations. And then, of course, in the past few decades, as Europe has become more and more Islamic and moved more and more to the left, so they're also colluding with the Islamic world against Israel. Hopefully that'll change soon, though, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I want to come to that. In the meantime, can you explain to our viewers and listeners maybe a little bit of a history of the West Bank and how Israel got that back into its hands, and what they call the settlements? I mean, why is this an issue? What's going on there? Because Israel is a sovereign nation and state, and there is no Palestinian state. So what's the deal here?
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that there is no Palestinian state. I was just on a television show yesterday where the host was telling me that there is a Palestine, that Israel has to come to an agreement with Palestine. Well, let's look at this situation as it is on the ground. Okay.
Okay.
There is no Palestine. There never has been a Palestine. Yes, the land of Israel was called Palestine for about 2,000 years, but there was no nation called Palestine. The Roman conquerors who drove the Jews out of the land of Israel, who expelled the Jews from the land of Israel about 2,000 years ago, they changed the name of the land from the remnant of the land of Israel, which was then called Judea, and they renamed it Palestina, naming it after the Philistines, who were the enemies of Israel, of course. So they gave it a Roman derivative. They called it Palestina, but the name stuck basically as Palestine for about 1900 years until Israel came home. And the full, I would say, what is now rapidly becoming a majority of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel as a sovereign nation again. Well, that was 1948 when the state of Israel was reestablished. And between 1948 and 1967, Israel was this little truncated country about the size of Rhode Island or Delaware. And it was a very, very precarious situation. We were just waiting for all of the Arab nations to attack and trying to wipe out Israel completely. There was even a running joke in Israel between 1948 and 1967 that the last person to leave the country should turn out the lights. But 1967 came along, all of the Arab nations attack Israel, promising to drive the Jews into the sea. And that's a quote from the Egyptian foreign minister at that time. Well, they attempted to do that, but obviously God had a different plan, and 6 days later the war was over, and Israel had recaptured its biblical heartland, Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, and Israel had recaptured East Jerusalem, where the two temples once stood, as well as recapturing several strategic areas in the north and the south of the country. Well, that's what happened in 1967. And between 1967 and 1993, there was a grassroots movement growing to rebuild the biblical heartland of Israel, to rebuild Judea and Samaria, and to rebuild eastern Jerusalem to its former glory. And so families have been moving in, mostly young families with children have been moving in for many years now, for decades. And we are now at the point where there are about, I would say it's getting close to about 750,000 or 800,000 Jews living in the areas that were recaptured in 1967. So that's the current situation. And so basically what we're doing here in places like Shiloh and Beit El and Hebron and so many other places is we are rebuilding the biblical heartland of Israel.
Right.
And there's nothing more just than rebuilding what was formerly sovereign Israel for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So remember, 1,000 years is a long time to be a sovereign nation. It's certainly a lot longer than the United States has been a sovereign nation. And there is no reason why any objective observer, short of being anti-Semitic or following the party line, whether it's the Islamic party line or the far-left party line, but there is nothing more just than recognizing Israel's right to build in its land, to give building permits in its land, and certainly in its biblical heartland, which was always central to the country.
Beautifully said, David. Beautifully said. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back with David Rubin. We're Skyping him in from Israel today. Islamic Tsunami is one of his books, and his latest one, More Sparks from Zion. And there is a picture of the Islamic Tsunami book on the screen there. Let me encourage you to check it out at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Check it out at the Christian bookstores. And we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today, and delighted to have back with us David Rubin, former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, and he's the founder and president of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund, and that fund is developed to help children who have been traumatized through terror. And you may want to check out a couple of his books. Sparks from Zion is his latest book, and then the one that he references a lot is Islamic Tsunami. Check out those books. You can also, if you want to support the Children Israel Fund, you can go to shilohisraelchildren.org, or you can contact him and get some of his writings at davidrubin.com. We're talking about, obviously, yesterday Secretary of State gave a very arrogant and condescending speech in support of the UN resolution, of the Security Council resolution, trying to prohibit Israel from building in their own land, which is crazy. So, David, it would appear to me that principally, morally, and spiritually, Israel has to ignore this resolution and keep on building. Am I right?
You are absolutely right. And I would take that a step further. I would say that Israel should speed up the pace of building. You know, so far over the past 8 years, Israel has pretty much been, well, shall I say, the grassroots of Israel, the people, have pretty much been stifled in the biblical heartland. Prime Minister of Israel has been restricting building, trying to limit the building because of the pressure, at least so he says, because of the pressure from the Obama administration. He's been saying, you have to understand me, I can't allow building to be, building permits to be given so easily. And now we're in a different situation. We're in a situation where Prime Minister Netanyahu is really going to have to stand on his own 2 feet. He'll have the support, it seems, from the Trump administration to go ahead and allow people the freedom to build, and the freedom to develop the communities and rebuild the historical communities in the biblical heartland. So will he go forward and do this? I certainly hope so, and I think there could be no better response to the what you rightly cited as the arrogance of Secretary Kerry and President Obama in trying to preach to Israel and to talk down to Israel in a time when they're on their way out the door.
Yeah,
I think they have to recognize that they lost.
Yeah,
they lost the free and fair election.
Right. You know, there's something brewing here that could be very interesting. And that could be, we don't know for sure, but it could be that the United States stands with Israel against the world. In other words, Trump coming in could stand with Israel against the UN resolution and against the peace talks in France, and basically say, no, we're standing with you, and that's the end of the deal.
Well, I could think of no better move that the United States could make. It would be good for the United States. It would be good for Israel. And sometimes you have to stand with justice.
Right.
And, I don't know how many people who are watching this broadcast are biblically literate, but it says in the Bible, it talks about Abraham. Abraham, who was the father of the people of Israel, and Abraham says that the people of Israel, or at least God says to them, that we're going to be a great nation, and that we're, that he goes out and he speaks about the one God, and he stands up against all the pagan idol worshippers. And Abraham was known as Avraham in Hebrew, Avraham HaIvri, which means Abraham the Hebrew. But the word HaIvri actually means from the other side. And so it means Abraham from the other side, meaning he had the boldness, Abraham had the boldness to stand up against all of the people who were disagreeing with him, and they were saying you have to worship the moon god and you have to worship the sun god, and Abraham stood up and he said, there is one God in this world, and he is the one who decides what is going to be.
Right.
And because of his courage, he is honored, and the lineage of Israel comes through him, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
It's through Abraham, but it was because of his courage to stand up against those who were wrong, and those who were making mistakes. And that's why he's called Abraham from the other side.
That's interesting. Of course, we know Genesis 12 talks about God speaking to Abraham, and he says that I will bless those that bless you, and I'll curse those that curse you. And all of the world will be blessed. All of the peoples of the world will be blessed through you. And so there is a spiritual application to this that obviously the secular news doesn't get. But let me ask you this, a couple other things before we run out of time, David. There is serious talk now that perhaps Trump will actually follow through by moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now, we'd all like to see that, but pragmatically, what can happen if that was to occur?
Pragmatically, it would bring great blessings to the United States.
Well, Well, that's the scripture I just gave you.
I don't put Bible on one side and practicality on the other side.
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, there is a reason why I quoted about Abraham, because Abraham had the courage to stand up to the world. And no matter what, let the chips fall where they may. And I'm hoping that President Trump, when he comes in, will have the courage, and I believe that he will, to stand up against the rioting Arabs. I'm sure there will be many. The Muslims will go crazy, as they are wont to do. And there will be threats from various countries, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe other Persian Gulf countries, and certainly from the terrorist organizations. But that will be a big test for President Trump and his administration. Are they going to stand up for what is right? Are they going to stand on the side of justice in Israel and in the Middle East? Or are they going to continue the old and tired policies that one administration after another has adopted of caving in to the pressure from the Arab nations and the Muslim world? I think that President Trump is going to stand up to the challenge. I really believe that he will. Well,
one of the indicators is tearing up the agreement with Iran. I mean, if they tear up that agreement with Iran, we're back to square one. He knows one of the consequences of that is what possibly could happen to Israel. So he's going to stand with Israel. So this is going to be an interesting time to see it. We'll just have to wait and see what happens after January 20th. But let me ask you this before we run out of time. Does Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the people of Israel believe there is a new day coming in the relationship with the United States through a Trump administration?
Well, the short answer is yes. Israel knows that there is a change coming, and we've seen it with some of the appointments. The American ambassador to Israel, who's a strong Land of Israel advocate. He believes strongly in the complete land of Israel and Israel's right to the full land of Israel. And also the gentleman who was appointed as Trump's main negotiator in charge of the peace process, he also recognizes that, at the very least, that Jerusalem is Israel's united capital. So, as I said, we're all hopeful here. We're waiting anxiously for January 20th to come. We'll see what other evil tricks are in Obama's sack that he holds next to him, and hopefully things will all be good when January 20th comes, and it'll just be the beginning of a true blossoming of the relationship between Israel and the United States, and for the sake of Judeo-Christian civilization, which has been neglected for so long.
Wow. Thank you so much, David. You're a delight. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out two books, Islamic Tsunami and Sparks from Zion, his latest two books. They can check out all the books. There are actually 5 books at this point. Okay.
More Sparks from Zion is the latest. All they have to do is go to DavidRubinIsrael.com. DavidRubinIsrael.com.
All right, thanks, my friend. Blessings on you, and let's talk again soon. Hey, what time is it? What time is it there?
It is 6:30 p.m.
All right. Have a great evening. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.